Peace, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of CHUCG Talk, your favorite payday show. I'm Brother Lee. This is Brother Eric. And we're here today to talk a little bit more about political education. That was our last series. We spoke a little bit on it, and folks were so excited or very intrigued by the conversation that they asked for a second before we moved on to the topic. However, before we go into that, though, of course, we always got to start with the joke of the day. That fire joke last week came from your guy, your boy. And this week we're gonna try and get some laughs out of y'all. We're gonna try and get some laughs out of y'all without without the crickets coming in the camera again. So brother Eric, go ahead, take it away for the joke of the day, my guy.
So I want to say before I say the joke of the day.
Absolutely, go for it. Forget it. Crickets again.
All right. So I got a joke.
Mm-hmm.
You want to hear it?
Yeah, go for it. Listen.
All right. What is a potato's favorite part about social media?
You beat me. Go for it.
You don't got it?
No, the potato.
Bro, the favorite part of social media for potato? The hashtag. The hashtag, you get it? The hashtag. Potato hash? Okay. All right. See? All right. So let it be known.
That's actually funny, man.
This is our collective,
the hashtag.
Our collective group.
Like
that was the
Browns.
Funniest joke.
Like hash browns hashtag. Yeah, I felt that one. That's good. That sounds like a Lee joke. I ain't gonna lie to you. That sounds like a joke Lee would say. So yeah, here we go. Here we go, y'all. After we can move on from that hashtag and move on. Oh my God. All right. I'm just,
hey, yo, that was good.
All right. So seriously, let's move on. So we talked about political education last week, and we're gonna dive a little bit more into it this week. Briefly, well, actually, let's take a step back. So because we talked about it last week, usually we give an intro of the topic we talk about before we talk about it. However, because we're rolling off of last week, I think we're just going to dive and spend more time of deep diving into the bell questions we had and actually answering the questions that folks have put out there. And in that way, we'll be able to really emphasize on the things we spoke on last week and just some new pieces of political education, new perspectives, if you will, that we want to share.
Can I say though, seriously?
Yeah.
And I know we haven't been doing it long, but the political education piece was my favorite. And people responded well to it. But also, man, I really just I love this, but also I really appreciate just the way the conversation was and where it's going. And even, I actually referenced a little bit of it in several meetings I've had since our last episode, several public, Zoom gatherings. And then also, man, I shared it. We had Maroon Team.
Yes.
Last week.
Thank you, yes.
Yes, the whole weekend, June 19th to June 21st. We're going to do it again next year at our second annual Maroon Team piece. And we talked about Maroon communities and the fact that I know that's one of the bell questions.
Yeah. For sure. So, yeah, man, thank you for that, Brother Eric. And if I can even second that, man, I've... Before coming into the work, I wasn't as connected to political education, but I've since find that is by far the most useful education for myself and most useful education that anybody can actually acquire. And it's that what I love about it is that there's a never ending path to it, if you will. There's always more to be educated on. There's always more perspectives and theories to dive into. So, with that being said, first bell question. So first bell question is from Nisha. So can you talk more about Maroon communities and the importance of them beyond just learning?
Can I take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
So actually, I like the second part of the question really because I think that is what, deciphers the
Bless you.
coronavirus. Sorry.
Wow.
So,
whoa.
I'm just joking. So, no, I'm good. It's the cotton. I'm allergic to cotton.
Right. Corona cotton. Right.
So anyway, that's probably gonna be edited out, but I really like that. That was really good. So, all right, let me back up. Okay, so I really appreciate the second part of that question. The second part of the question really speaks to something that I think is very important. Political education is delineated from just normal public or private education because the purpose of it is to actually utilize it for the purpose of building power.
There you go.
So it's like you're not just learning about something just to learn about it to like win
Better
Jeopardy
purpose.
or something like that. You know
Absolutely,
what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Or
Useful
to win
knowledge.
a game show. You know what I'm saying? But
Uh-huh.
it's not. It's like useful knowledge,
There
but
you
it
go.
also is useful beyond a job. It's useful for us to be able to assert our power as human beings and to humanize ourselves. So with that being said, I think when we talk about maroon communities, we're talking about, and for those who didn't catch the lecture that I did, they are communities of, in many cases, of African peoples who escaped or liberated themselves from enslavement. And the community essentially was built on the premise of sovereignty or liberation, or even in resistance to enslavement.
Right.
And so, and in other cases, the history would show that they were communities of mixed people,
Right.
not just mixed in terms of like black and white and indigenous, but also mixed in terms of like where people came from. So there were different languages, and they created different languages and new cultures and new ways of building houses, new ways of communicating and socializing. That actually, when you talk about what's the significance of it, I think that it shows that there are different ways. One, there's not one monolithic way to be black.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
There you go.
Being black is just not one way. And
Right.
the beautiful thing about being diverse as a people is to be able to grow what we already have. You feel me? And so maroon communities, I feel like that's one reason that it's important. It gives us lessons. Also, I think it offers a pathway of liberation that look different.
That's
What I talked about, you know, and I'll be quiet. So
No. But that was what. Well, yeah. Well, I'll take it on from there. But that's actually what my response was going to be is that like when you talk about liberation, right? You talk about really liberating the community. When you look at the Maroons and everything you've done, you talked about creating your own language. You talked about creating your own system. You talk about creating your own communities with whatever colors of folks, you know what I mean, you want to operate within.
Right.
That's something that I feel like in our society is almost like unheard of, one, but almost folks don't see it as possible, right? If you will, because we've been socially trained to be dependent upon so many things where we've been kind of, I would say, we've been kind of trained also to not use our resources, not collectively come together and build together. And that's what a liberation work, I think, really happens, is when you can really sit down and identify resources from different communities, collectively add those resources to one community, and out of that, you have, you know, a path to liberation, if you will, and that works for all communities involved.
And it's new. It's something completely new.
Exactly.
So it's like not what's there or from there. It's actually something
and it's
new.
tailored. That's what a lot of folks get. It's tailored to folks in that community.
This
and
new thing,
if
right?
you want to be a part of it, you have something to operate within that works for the collective. You know what I mean?
So maroon communities today in the 21st century are actually using something that they call ethno-education, right?
Okay.
And it's just a tactic. Ethno-education is essentially people go to public school and all of that, but they learn the ways of the old.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And the beautiful
I can
thing
dig that.
about that is because it offsets and supplements what you have. So I think that that's important as well. There are pathways. These maroon communities, in many cases, some of them don't exist, but settlements that existed in 1700s, 1800s, 1900s still exist today.
Yeah.
You literally have communities of people. One of them in Colombia, I know I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Palenque, San Basilio. So that's in Colombia. It's a group of people who they have their own culture. And to be honest, I see a bit of Cherry Hill in it. Just in terms of how people organize themselves and how, like, they have a council of elders.
Right.
They don't, like, they have police from their, state that come or whatever if they need to, but they handle conflicts in-house with a council of elders.
I love that.
They have a way. So all of that to say, I think to answer the question, the reason why I think is really important is because we learn these lessons and they give us mirrors into the past, and they give us mirrors into what we can present. And I think that one of the best opportunities that Black people have to liberate ourselves is to decolonize our minds and in doing so, undo the way in which we've learned through public school and through white institutions. They taught us to see, and we'll talk about this next time, but they taught us to see history like, let me learn about Lee Jordan. And Lee Jordan Jr. Was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and all of this. But don't really, and we get the history is told from the perspective of the so-called individual. It's not told from the perspective of a people, or told from the collective perspective of a movement, because then you get to understand tactics rather than just getting all immersed in you. And nothing wrong with being immersed in somebody's story, but being immersed in your story is exactly, and it actually feeds into the idea of individualism, which centers the individual at the center of the earth, not the collective. And so, like, collectivism centers the collective, recognizing that the so-called individual or the person is a part of the larger strategy. And so I think that that's why studying maroon communities are important. And it also gives, if you will, a balance between other ways that liberation have been taught to us.
Agreed.
One way that white supremacy shows up is that white supremacy tells you a certain way to struggle. You can struggle this way. You can struggle like Martin Luther King and have a dream and not mess too many people up. And people would like whiteify the story of Martin Luther King Jr. One, by separating him from the collective and a part of a larger movement, and then twisting the words, right? So all of that to say, I feel like political education helps to open up our minds so that we can utilize this newfound information to build. And I feel that studying maroons give us a pathway of liberation from our own hands rather than from the hands or the pens of other people. And I think that legislation and stuff is important, but particularly I think that it's important for us to lift up stories of liberation from our own hands.
Absolutely. And if I can add on that really quick before we jump to the next bell question, there's three things, and I hope I remember them all. There's three things that jump out at me that you mentioned. One, you talked about how they still allow the law enforcement in their state to come in and govern, you know what I mean? And I think it's important to know. Palenque, I don't want to mispronounce that, but I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that, like, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily if nobody can be in partnership outside of the community. It's just that this is our communities and our ways of operation. You and this is how we choose to operate with you. I think that's a very important piece. The second thing was, you talked about how they've been around since even the 1800s. You're talking about longevity here. You're talking about liberation, paths of liberation that has worked and continue to work and are still relevant to the days before myself and probably you have been thought about by far. You know what I mean? So that's super important to know that, like, that's a system that holds itself up, right? That's a system that holds itself up. And the last piece of that I want to add before we jump to the next ballot question is you talked about the Council of Elders. And that's important about being able to transfer that narrative and carry out that history. You're talking about back in the 1800s, I can't imagine the folks, the wisdom, the knowledge that have come from whatever that path of liberation and whatever experiences they've been able to experience thus far. And it lives through the elders. Elders are the best books you're ever going to read. So it lives through the elders. And I just think it's important, you know what I mean? And that's the problem that we struggle, or we've been struggling with for a long time, is controlling our own narratives, right? You even, and it's the last thing I'll say, but even they fed us the pictures of the Black Panthers, and they fed us the pictures of Bobby King and Bobby X, and them joints are all in black and white. Like, bro, that's not that long ago. Like, I have elders who were around, you know what I mean? So I just think it's really important to control that narrative and control how the information gets passed down. So thank you, Nisha, for that question. Next bell question. So this is from Brother Leon. So Brother Leon asks, who qualifies to teach political education? Great question. Great question. So you mind if I go first? Okay. I think one, and this is just one requirement. I'll probably have to do some more thinking, but I think one of the main requirements, there's a lot of undoing to be done first. Coming from your normal society. That's a good point. Coming from your normal society, I don't think you necessarily have to be the type of individual, but more so the kind of individual that has that kind of perspective, if you will, that allows you to soak up information, filter out the information that's necessary, and be able to also understand organizational theories and ways that you can take them and take the complex theories and make them simple and deliver them to folks, and even build on top of those and continue to add to over time and keep theories connected. And I know that's a lot, but I just think it's a special feature that has to lie there with educating, but also understanding how to be educated. You know what I mean? Because I think those two go hand in hand. If if you can't learn a certain way, I don't think you can teach a certain way. And that's what I think I'm getting at. But that's just one thing that immediately popped in mind once I read the question, which is a great question, Brother Leon. And you had something to add.
Yeah, I would just say, so, last episode we talked about popular political education.
Uh-huh.
When I talk about political education, I'm talking about popular, right? Popular coming from the Latin word, the people, right? Or like of the people. And so for me, I would answer that question by saying anybody can teach political education. Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed talks about, the book should be up here somewhere, but he says that liberatory, education is one that flips the power dynamics, where the student is teacher and the the students are teachers and the teacher is student. So you got teacher student and students teachers, right? So it's a bit philosophical, but I think generally speaking, I think that because it comes from the people, anybody can teach it. But I agree with you that you have to be able to understand people enough and have good facilitation skills so that you can so that you can lead with good questions that get people to journey with you. You feel me? That's my opinion. I think that anybody can teach political education because it's like, if you had a thought or a perspective and you lead in conversation so that we create a collective body of knowledge, that, that collective body of knowledge can be facilitated by anybody who has good facilitation skills, and who has done the spiritual, deep introspection and self-reflective work.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, that's a good question, brother. That's a really good question. You got anything else you want to add to that?
No,
I think that was a pretty straightforward question.
No,
I really appreciate like how you can really give a more so a direct answer, if you will. You know what I mean? Next bell question. Oh, that wasn't even a good bell hit. Give me a second, y'all. There we go. So this is from Sister Erica. What's the best way to multiply the political education in Baltimore? That's a really good question.
Yeah, that is.
That's a really good question. I think one of the ways, is understanding what kind of political education is necessary, take that back. Before you understand where is the political education necessary, who is it necessary to,
right.
And what relevance or what benefit will come directly out of that. So I see it as almost planting seeds, if you will, right? So if I go around and I take a collective of folks and teach folks these different theories and how to understand, or how, like you said, that I forget exactly the language you use, but how to teach them how to teach in the way that, as Paulo Freire mentioned, making students teachers and teachers students. I think that's one way of collectively, I don't want to say building robots, but almost teaching folks or giving folks a toolkit, if you will, that allow them to go around and be effective in these different areas that political education is clearly necessary, aka our schools and education systems, where we get taught, and I'm about to rant for a little bit, where we get taught things that we never ever got to use once we got out of 12th grade. You know what I mean? So, yeah, before I ain't even gonna dive on y'all, but that's one way that comes to mind is really just having well, if that's the case, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think our schools our school systems are really just
like K through 8.
Yeah,
K through 12.
K through 12, absolutely. K through 12. I think every single number and letter that we got in there, it's just not. It's a placeholder, if you will. And call me crazy. You learn math, right? You learn your basics. However, you don't get a toolkit to survive. Right, you know what I mean? That's it. And once you get past that, it's almost fill it up. It's almost give them something to do for a while. And when you're going through the school system, you don't understand that in that way, because you're going through the school system. When I was in science, I want to be clear, I was killing this. I was killing a lot of my classes. So, but it was to learn that thing was to get to the goal of passing that class. Right? Never in my mind when I was learning my science or my history was I going to walk out my door and be like, all right, well, now I'm going to go home and make a volcano here now. You know what I mean? Right. Or I'm going to look up, or now I want to build me a little Christopher Columbus boat. Now. No, it's not. You know what I mean? And then not only, and the last piece I'll add to that before I light y'all up is that, or to finish lighting y'all up, is that who creates the agendas? Who creates who creates the curriculum? Yes. You know what I mean? And I think that needs to be really talked about, and I think it needs to be really highlighted about who gets a say so in what we're learning in our schools, right?
Because these are PhDs who do that.
But so this is my thing, and I want y'all to hit me out on this.
It's a good point.
if you're creating a curriculum that comes very close to being useless after 12th grade, and
unless you go to a particular school,
unless you go to a particular
school, City or Poly,
exactly.
some other schools and charter schools,
right.
They have a better. It's been my experience that they have like a better sense of being able to veer away from.
Right.
Other schools kind of almost have like, it's almost like some schools, the big schools in Baltimore, for those who are not hearing from Baltimore, Baltimore City College and Polytechnic Institute, Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, and other schools, Western Senior High School. There are a couple schools that are almost like, for example, if you're a football fan, they're like the Patriots playbook.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then others kind of got like the Browns playbook.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so and it's unfortunate. Like we all in the NFL, but the question is, are the Browns ever going to win the championship? Right. And if they do, it's probably because somebody from the Patriots is going to go over to the Browns.
That's very true.
Just keeping it G, like that's kind of how it works. So I'm sorry to say that. But if I can see just real quick, because I know we don't have a lot of time. But what I would say, generally speaking, is that like I completely agree with your analysis. And what I would say, one of the best way to build political education is by creating, and we talked about it in our last episode, creating like schools, right? Or creating study groups where we do this. This could happen. Old school organizers will remember this, and new school organizers should learn from the old school folks. House meetings. It's meeting with your neighbors, sitting in the house. In the age of COVID, you can use Zoom. In fact, this weekend I heard some folks on Zoom talking about absolute nonsense, in my opinion. So we got so much technology at our hands, whether it's Google Meet, Zoom, or any video teleconferencing app you could use, even on Facebook Live, to explore concepts of things that are centering around us. So I think the way to do that is use our social media platforms, use our relationships, and go to the old house meeting, go to your block, talk to your neighbor about what's happening, whether it's in the legislative process or what's gonna come because of the primary election is over now, or if it's talking about Black Lives Matter or the movement for Black Lives. If it's talking about what's happening during the time, or just talking about on your block, how can we get ourselves organized to get speed bumps, however small or large it is. I think that the way to do it is just to be with one another. Connect, play spades, and while you're talking smack, you know what I'm saying? You're talking smack, playing spades when you're dealing, also talk about what's happening. When you're at the barbershop, it happens all the time. The only difference is that we don't typically use it to organize ourselves.
Exactly.
So that's it.
But
like
we got it, and I'll add this last piece before we close out. But that's the best vehicle we got.
Absolutely.
Is being in community, right? Because I mean, like you said, we go to the barbershops, we talk all day in the barbershop.
Salon.
You know what I mean?
The spa.
And it's like
social media.
The platforms are there, the folks are there on the platforms, and the folks are comfortable on those platforms. You feel me? Like I go to the barbershop to talk. You know what I mean? I go to the barbershop, of course, to get the line up, but I go to the barbershop to talk. You know what I mean? So it's organizing being done there, but what kind of organizing, right? And I think it's just
for what purpose?
For what
That's
purpose?
the question. Right?
I think it's more so understanding or being more. I would say. What would I say?
Intentional.
Yes, I would say being more intentional about what we want to organize for, the purpose. You know what I mean?
And not being scared too. But sometimes it could be crazy, like y'all talking about the fight last night, and then you got to be one to think about. Hey, yo, George Floyd got
and
you know what I'm saying? Breonna Taylor, man, she was murdered. You know what I'm saying? And you don't want to like. Sometimes you look like the oddball. You know what I mean? Coming out, but you got to be willing to be like, yo. So all right, we having this conversation. Then what we gonna do with it? You feel me? And also being willing to take something to somebody when they say some nut stuff. You know what I'm saying? Y'all know I want to say something else, but somebody say some nut stuff, and you like, yo, you can't say that around here. You know what I'm saying? Using certain words.
That's real.
You feel me?
That's real.
Like, so anyway, I feel like
I love that.
That's the way to do it. Use the platforms we already have, because that's one thing I learned from social work, bro. And I know we talked about this. Meet people where they are. Don't try to do nothing different. You feel me? If the way to get people is through hip hop, make a song.
Yeah, that's
you feel me?
There you go.
If it's a way
been done. These are things we've seen done over and over again.
If you want to hold
the song that was amazing, and you know what I mean. And that song has a lot of people listening in ways that they haven't listened before, and having them. It builds conversation. If at the bare minimum, it's going to do a lot of things. And I think it's going to be a song that's going to ripple from here on out. But it builds conversation. It opens up conversation. It's all organized.
And if you want to organize regular people, go where they at. Go to the block.
Exactly.
Go to the shopping center. Go where.
And be ready to be uncomfortable, because the work doesn't come with tailored to what you need, and you know what I mean, what you got going on. So
I know we had not to that. I know we got one more question, and we have I know we got one more bell question, and I just want to speak to it real quick. But that's it. Yeah, no. So the question was, I just wanted to because I didn't want us to forget about the books from last time.
Right.
I know somebody from Red Emmons asked,
Right.
all people always ask about what could young organizers be reading. So I think we have a list of things here. I want to lift up some things. We got Baba Claude Anderson, right, who has several books on different topics, but one of my favorite books is a book called Powernomics. I think it's a really good book for you to read. And then there's another book, Black Labor, White Wealth, right?
Yes, man.
That's another good book.
One of my favorite books by far.
I think, man, there are a ton of books. There's Freedom Farmers here. There's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Blueprint for Black Power, Yurugu, Kwame Ture, and Charles K. Hamilton wrote this book called Black Power, The Politics of Liberation, Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. Man, it's tons of books out there, and I could be talking about a lot of different ones, but there are tons of books. Farming While Black, man, there's like so much stuff. But then there's several articles that I would go to, particularly those who are interested in doing food work. There's this one article by Eric Holt Jimenez from Food First. It's an article called Food Security, Food Justice, Food Sovereignty. That's one that I start with so that people understand the different pathways to addressing food issues. That's a good article. There are tons of books, man. There's this one book that I really appreciate, Cultivating Food Justice. It's a really good one. A general book that I think folks should look at that's not specific to food stuff. The Autobiography of Malcolm X.
That's a must.
Man, there's another book that's a novel actually by Pierre Rebbe. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's called In the Earth, So in the Heart. I think that's the title. I'll check that. But it's a really, really, really good book. It talks about colonialism and I read a lot. There's tons of books that I think young organizers can get with. And not only books, there are pamphlets that people can get to. There have been a ton of pamphlets that have taught me and helped me grow. In fact, that I passed on to Brother Lee,
Absolutely.
And not only that, YouTube,
I don't usually give them
anything, he don't give them back. In fact, we'll talk about after the show.
Yeah.
Dr. Amos Wilson has tons of talks on YouTube you can check out. Dr. Marimba Ani, she has tons of stuff. She's the author of the book Yurugu. Lots of good stuff that talks about Black perspectives. But I feel like, that's something that's ongoing. A part of my answer from last time was that we're going to add some, in the comments, some more books and stuff. Yeah. And we're also working on an annotated bibliography that will be used for folks who are a part of our political education community. And I want folks to also be a part of that. So we'll make that annotated bibliography public. It might be for a price to support our work. It might be for free. I'm not sure, but be on the lookout for that. There are tons of things that we could be reading and use as the basis of our conversation.
Yeah.
My fault.
And that's good, man. I'm excited to have that accessible for folks who won't get to see this episode, who won't get to see it in real time.
Yeah.
But with that being said, man, it's time to close out. Y'all got paid today. Treat me to lunch. I really can go for some fish tikka masala if y'all got it on you. But yeah, y'all got paid today, and please catch us on your next payday. Send us questions. We'll see you again on July 10th, and we'll be talking a little bit about African-centered approaches to history and movements. And lastly, find us at Black Yield on Instagram, Black Yield Institute on Facebook, and Black Yield on Twitter. Do you be tweeting?
We do tweet. We tweet a little bit. Yeah. But thank y'all. Look, I can't say this enough. I love political education. One, because as y'all can see, I like running my mouth. But political education is equally important to building relationships. So we got to be able to, as Paulo Freire talks about, we have to engage in praxis.
Yes.
That is action and reflection. He says that reflection by itself is mere verbalism. You're just talking. And action by itself is just activism. You're just doing stuff. We need to be able to think about the world and act upon the world. Let's do that together. See y'all in the next episode. I really appreciate y'all. Peace.